Welcome to Mortified, the Friendship Quest, a podcast where two long-distance friends bounce media recommendations, all in hopes the other will like it. I'm Aaron.
And boo! I'm Benedict Cumberbatch's terrible fucking wig.
And this week, we take our first steps into the glamorous world of Cold War spycraft with John le Carré's 1974 novel and perhaps a little bit of its 2011 adaptation into a film, with Tinker Tailor, Soldier Spy. Before Lenin Claus wishes you a merry compromat, remember you can help us on Mortify the Legitimacy Quest by smashing that like and subscribe on YouTube, leaving us a review on the podcast platform of your choice, or just telling a friend about the show. Layla.
Aaron.
What's our new unit about?
We're doing spy movies.
Yeah, how did we get here?
We were looking at our list, and we saw some spy movies, and we were going to do just one. And then instead we said, what if we did a whole unit on spy movies? And that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting spy stuff. I think we brought up the idea of Mission Impossible because I don't think either of us have seen them. And then it was like, we could do James Bond. We talked about the new James Bond game that came out. And then we also have been like kind of flirting with the idea of Austin Powers. So we're going to work a little bit of Austin Powers in here. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, we're starting off with like, I think of the stuff that we're talking about when we're doing our spy unit, this is absolutely like this is the black sheep, right? This is not glamorous, despite what I said in the intro. This is the methodical, bureaucratic, almost noir, presentation of what Cold War spycraft was like. This is a classic novel, and it's also like the one that like the fewest people have engaged with and is the least sexy, certainly in our reading of it.
Yes. It is the black sheep. I do think it's going to provide a useful framing for kind of the two sides of these stories, which is like one is competency porn and the other one is Mission Impossible. And then James Bond is somewhere in the middle, right? Because James Bond is originally a British invention, very, very much. But I feel maybe has become a little bit Americanized in his journey to Hollywood. But I believe the James Bond we're watching is From Russia with Love. So like a classic.
Well, no.
Pre Daniel Craig. Or what are we watching?
We're watching Goldfinger, of course, because we need a counterpart,
right, because we're gonna
to watch
Goldmember. But that's still a classic. That's still a
yes.
pre Craig classic.
Yeah, so I'm gonna try to. You actually wrote up a summary for Tinker Tailor just now. That we're not going to do our 5-sentence summary as we normally do, because let me tell you, folks, this one was an extremely difficult read. I don't want to say a bad read. I don't want to give the audience that impression, but I think both me and Layla struggled to get through it, and we'll talk about why here in a bit. But to be completely honest, or not honest but clear, we're just going to do a pre-written summary. So, in 1970s Great Britain, the head of a British spy service called the Circus, which is basically MI6, MI5, suspects that there is a Russian double agent among his high brass. When his attempt to source the name of the mole from a mission in Soviet Czechoslovakia goes wrong, which injures Jim Prideaux, and he is later taken captive by the Soviets, Control, who is the leader of the Circus or MI6, is disgraced and later dies of a heart attack because of the stress of this failure. His second in command, George Smiley, who is disgraced because of this fiasco in Czechoslovakia. He's kind of forced into early retirement. He is kind of asked to be brought back to help find the mole. And there are 4 key suspects, which are Alaline, who is the new head of the MI6 of the Circus. There's Esterhazy, a Hungarian Anglophile who has been recruited into the service. There's Bill Hayden, who is sleeping with George Smiley's wife, and Roy Bland, who, for the life of me and Layla, we cannot describe what key role he played in either the movie or the novel. He's just kind of there. But he has a lot of help with some other people who are like either non-suspects or were formerly disgraced in the service. Mostly Peter Gilliam, who is like kind of a a mentee of George's. Peter helps like obtain a lot of files and helps corroborate dates and stuff. At the end of the book, we discover that the guy who was sleeping with George's wife, Bill Hayden, he is the mole. And Hayden is, once that secret gets out, the guy who burned him, or the guy he burned, Jim Prideaux, comes back and kills him, and that's how the novel ends. And what did you think, Layla? Just overall thoughts.
I had a couple moments reading this book where I wanted to, like, my first initial gut instinct was, oh my God, I'm so bored. What is happening? I'm bored. I'm confused. And then I had this other thought, this second thought, which is usually the truer thought, which is, I really, really love Witch King and Queen Demon by Martha Wells. And I think those novels are equally fucking inscrutable if you're not already hooked in and willing to go along for the ride. And so I think that Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy is to like a bored middle-aged man what Queen Demon and Witch King are to me. And I can respect that. I can respect a book written for perverts. I'm just the wrong kind of pervert. This is not my kink.
Yeah, I think this book is also not served well by the format of Mortified, which is like, ostensibly we give ourselves 2 weeks to read this book. And, I did try to get through it, over the last, we took a short break, but, I've been trying to read it over the past month, and I really only was able to finish it, the last, half of it this morning. It took me 4 hours. It was very difficult to do. But
I did 4 hours Friday, I did it a little bit on Friday, and then got halfway yesterday, and I did the back half this morning like you did.
Yeah, it is a very dense book. There are a lot of characters. There are flashbacks that go back and forth between the present and the past. And this is a really challenge for me personally, because like the part of trying these new units out is an attempt to expand our repertoire, get us to try hard things as critics. And I think this absolutely qualifies as a hard thing to do from a critical standpoint. And it is frustrating for me to run up against a novel that does not reveal its secrets to me in a straightforward way. And I definitely don't want to ding it for any of the choices it's making, because they're clearly intentional, right? The book wants to reward you for taking your time with it, but at the end of the day, this project is not super well structured for a long, thoughtful read. We tried that with Ayn Rand. I think maybe if we had broken this into 3 or 4 episodes, we could have got there. But again, we just didn't for this one, and interesting. It's an interesting challenge, and I'm not too I'm not too proud to admit that, like, sometimes a book stumps me in a way that I need to think about.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the feeling I was chewing on also between Saturday and this morning, and I think that's why I came to the Queen Demon example, because I remember reading Witch King. Sorry that I'm using those two titles interchangeably. I remember reading Witch King, which is the first in the 2 books that have come out so far, and I remember thinking to myself, am I stupid? Or do I just have no fucking idea what's going on? But I like and trust Martha Wells and her writing so much, like after reading Murderbot, that I like Kai as a protagonist a lot, which is the key protagonist of those novels. I like the world building that she was doing, even though I could only understand half of it. And also there were lesbians. So I stuck it out and I went along for the ride. I will say the very tastefully and tactfully treated for its time homoeroticism of this book did help.
Listen, there's a little bit of everything for something for everybody in this book. I think we both agree. We actually just watched the movie mere hours ago. We started this movie
15 minutes
yeah
ago.
it was not that long ago. And I think the movie does a lot better job of streamlining the main plot. Again, not that's not a criticism of the book necessarily. The book is trying to do something else, but I think in terms of just sheer comprehensive, choices to make it easier to understand the book, um, the movie helps a lot, and I don't know, right? Uh, Normally we try to like go through and hit key scenes, but in the book a lot of these key scenes are just conversations, and that's great. It's fun and interesting to read through a well done conversation, but talking about a conversation is hard to do. I think Lacara's got some great prose, great turns of phrase, but I don't know. I feel like maybe as critics, certainly I don't feel like I've got to the point where I can be like, okay, this is an interesting conversation because of these reasons. And maybe that's also because we haven't gone back and, reread and really dug into the meat of this book. But yeah, I mean, do we want to try to just do this with characters? How do you best propose we lay out the interesting parts of this book for our audience?
Um, that's a good question, and I think I agree with you in that this book. Sometimes I think about Mortified, generally speaking, right? And I think about what we're trying to do about getting deeper as critics, because this was an initiative that you proposed before the start of this year, and I'm obviously all in on. I want us to get smarter and for our brains to get wrinklier. But I think about the constraints of this show, just like you brought up earlier, and I'm like, okay, what can we reasonably achieve? What is the lens of this show that we are gearing towards? Because I think this book, if anything, this episode is going to turn into like a bit of a discussion about what are the constraints of the show. Because a more thoughtful, like a truly deep read of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy would, I think, involve going back and asking questions like, is George Smiley a reliable narrator if we know what we're looking for? Like when in what's the first in Knives Out, right? When Daniel Craig does the flashbacks and you kind of like catch the switching of the drinks and all that stuff that is going on in the background, that on a second watch you could be like, oh my god, that did happen. Are there moments like that you can catch? Are there things in the spycraft that are cool? Like, we just don't have time or frankly the interest of doing that. So I think this discussion is more about like, as two casuals to the genre, what is it that we can get out of this without going that deep?
Mm-hmm.
And I think perhaps that is best served by maybe talking about the characters and their relationships, because the spycraft, it went over our heads in a big way.
Mm-hmm. In that case, let's start with George. George is, this novel was published in 1974, and it feels like, I don't think we ever get specific dates, but it definitely feels like the novel is contemporaneous with this publication. I think, we can establish it's like mid 70s, maybe early 70s, but like definitely decline of the British Empire, deep in the Cold War era.
I think there's like mentions of events happening abroad. I am sure that if we like went and looked it up, we could triangulate a year. But again, like,
right. George is in the middle of all this. He's just been kind of let go from the service, or at least pushed out because of this disaster in Czechoslovakia. And he's having a tough time. We're introduced to him as like kind of a pathetic man. There are descriptions of him as being kind of like a sad cuck, and I don't mean that as a joke, even though it's a funny thing to say. Like his wife is cheating on him with this other guy, and she's gone up to,
with
I guess,
many men.
I guess, yeah, at this point it's not even just Hayden, right? But she's gone up to be with her relatives, I think, up north somewhere, and
she's run off with a boy because she keeps withdrawing money from George's pension.
Oh yeah, there's a quote that it's like, who has a love affair in Inverness or something. Immingham. Whoever had a love affair in Immingham, for goodness sakes. Where was Immingham? Very funny thing to say. But like, Yeah, he's just like this down in the luck guy. I think the Gary Oldman presentation of him gives him a lot more gravitas than I imagined him in the book, because like he seemed like kind of a sad sack, just kind of like my wife's left me, I lost my job, I'm just kind of putting around. There's a bit where he's like going to buy a very fancy book for his wife, and then like try to win her back, but then he just like doesn't even understand why he's getting it, and like gets mad at himself. I think he doesn't end up picking it up at all. Like he bought it, but then doesn't actually bring it to her. Um, and he like finds his purpose again when he's like sought out by this his former protege Gillum, um and is like brought back on to investigate this mole. And like you can see it's like, oh, this is why he used to be a big deal, because he does this fucking, we were going to talk about Benedict Cumberbatch a little bit, but he does the mind palace thing of like getting all this shit together and creating these conspiracy boards. You can see like that's why he was good at reading through files and imagining a scenario in his mind. But yeah, what did you think of George?
I had a very similar read where I pictured him kind of down on his luck and kind of pathetic, and so much of his framing of this mystery surrounds Anne and what Anne is doing, and everyone's asking him about Anne, and he's constantly ignoring the questions. His coat doesn't fit right. He's just kind of sad. But then when he has this like, I think John le Carré does this really cool thing where he has this like sharpness almost about him, where it's once he's in the zone, just the restraint with which he approaches things, or the certainty with which he approaches things, like that's when you see that like, oh, this guy's the real fucking deal. And there's a reason people come to him, and that they respect him, and that Control respected him. We should also note, Control did suspect him also of maybe being the mole. That is why he got sent to Berlin when Operation Testify, yes?
Yeah, yes.
That's the Czech thing, when Operation Testify was going down. I think I was also surprised by the Gary Oldman casting, but I think if you're going to make anybody watch that movie, you kind of need Anne Oldman.
Yeah.
In the lead role.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I quite liked. I liked Smiley again. It's just a lot. It's just a lot of interviews and a lot of sad divorcee thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll drop a link to the video that you sent me that like was a summary of this book.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I think the creator used some AI images, so I definitely don't endorse that. But he did bring up the idea that this was like a very noir style, which I do think lends itself to that. I agree with that read, because there is a lot of just like people, smoking and being sad and thinking about the past and all their fuck ups,
and about women.
And about women, yeah. There's a lot of weird women stuff in this book. A lot of people try to hook up with, college students, which I don't approve of.
It's so funny because when you phrase it like that, I can't help but think all roads in this podcast lead back to Naruto. I can't help but think about the fact that we often talk about properties where things are gay because they're so misogynistic. This is a little bit misogynistic and also very explicitly gay.
Let's talk about Anne a little bit, because Anne is really cool in this book in that she never directly appears. Like we only ever have George's memories of her. Maybe my favorite Anne quote in this is when he remembers her describing him, quote, like an egg cozy. His beautiful wife had remarked not long before the last occasion on which she left him, and her criticism, as so often, had endured. And I was like, yeah, that's George, just getting owned by his wife constantly.
And then she got compared to like some beautiful, like this is a beautiful woman. She got compared to Garbo. I forget what that actress's first name is, but like everyone's constantly talking about Anne. Somebody was like, why don't you and I trade places? You could take my job and I'll go shack up with Anne.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, damn, people are obsessed with your wife, King.
Yeah.
Too bad that she has left you apparently multiple times
for her cousin at one point.
Bill is her fucking cousin.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know why. I'm glad they cut that from every other adaptation. But there's like, by the way, they're distant cousins.
We don't know if they cut that from 1979 because we like skipped around a couple of episodes.
I hope they had the good sense to do that, because that was wild, Mr. Le Carré. I don't know why you did that, but sure.
Yeah, what is it about that little accent on his name that makes you want to just go full heft? I do it every time.
He's a British guy. Like, he fully worked for MI6. Like, he just wanted a French name. I think it means the square is what that video said, which is very funny.
I kind of like Roy Bland, unmemorable.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, Anne haunts the narrative in a really interesting way. I love that she is identified as George's biggest weakness by the KGB, essentially. At one point, Anne had given George a lighter, said like, to George from Anne with all my love. And when George, in a past mission had gone to interrogate the guy who is now like currently the head of the KGB or whatever, and
Carla?
Carla, he like pushes Carla really hard on like trying to defect and being like, surely your wife, you got to think of your wife. And Carla, at one point George offers him some cigarettes and gives him the lighter, and Carla just takes the lighter, which is such an all-timer move. He doesn't even smoke the cigarettes.
He takes a pack, but he doesn't smoke them, which is hysterical.
Yeah, he's really good. Carla, again, like, not a huge character in the sense of that, like, he shows up and says anything, but like he is like the evil mastermind behind all of these betrayals, which I think is really cool. And I'm sure he comes up in other novels that follow Tinker Tailor. But yeah, Carla, all-time villain.
Well, Carla, in his interrogation with Smiley, Carla says literally nothing. He does not say a word. Carla does not have a line, insofar as I can remember in this book. And one of the things I really liked about the movie adaptation was that when Smiley is recounting this story to Gwillem, it doesn't cut to a flashback. It just, Smiley starts to kind of inhabit the physicality of having done that interrogation in that living room that they're sitting in. And I was like, that's good. That's a good one. From a production standpoint, that's one less location, baby, and they're crushing it with that. And two, like, Carl's not gonna say a word anyway, so why would you show him? Keep him mysterious, right? I think it lent a little bit of a menace. So
yeah, absolutely. It's a really good scene. I will try to drop a link to that in the video description. But yeah, those are, we're kind of going through characters because we're trying to pick out the memorable ones, because there's a lot of ones that are important but unmemorable, which is maybe true to how it is to be a spy, is that everybody is kind of important and also mundane. But we should probably talk about Jim Prideaux, who is one of the more important characters in this book, because he's the guy who gets betrayed and shot in Czechoslovakia, which is now Czechia. Did you know that? They changed the name? I did not know that until I watched them play in the World Cup this year. Sorry, I guess I know the Czech Republic existed, but I didn't realize they changed that. Anyway,
yeah, I like that. Turkey's getting a cool spelling. Czechia is now Czechia, and then I'm just waiting for Georgia. We got to do something about Georgia. All right, Georgia,
both the nation and the state.
Lord, two different things that we have to do to each of those locations. Georgia, I'm rooting for you. I need you to get the West to stop calling you Georgia. It's fucking confusing, especially for baby immigrants like I was. In Russian, have I ever mentioned on this podcast that I speak fluent Russian? This might be a crazy reveal.
There's no way you haven't mentioned that. We've been doing this for over 200 episodes. There's no way you haven't brought up the fact that you speak Russian.
That's true, statistically. Let's hope. In Russian, that country is called Gruzia. That's not Georgia. Do you know how fucking confusing that is? So, Georgia, I'm rooting for you. You're next. Get these Westerners to respect you.
Shoutouts to Gruzia. I'm sure that was a great pronunciation.
No, I was gonna say, good job. Great. First hit.
Jim Prideaux is interesting because Prideaux is probably better. Jim Prideaux is introduced early on in the book through the lens of a little boy who he is the teacher of. So this is one of the not problems. Again, I'm being negative because I'm struggling with it, but this is one of the weird aspects of the book, which is that they introduce Jim Prideaux through this lens of what he did after he was burned, which is he went and showed up to this school and just became a teacher. And basically a traditional British boarding school, right? A bunch of young boys doing shit. He's basically like a maniacal PE teacher. At one point, an owl flies into the classroom and is like, mortally wounded, and he finishes it off by breaking its neck. At one point, there's a bit where he's just like, all right, kids, I have this car. I'm going to let you drive it around in a circle in the field, which I didn't believe happened until I saw that happen in the movie. And I was like, oh, okay, so I'm not insane. That's just the thing that's happening. But yeah, what do you think about Jim Prideaux?
Listen, I love like a just a weird bisexual man, and that's what he was giving me, right?
Mhm.
He rolls up to this boarding school. He's like, I think weird PE teacher is exactly it. He teaches like French and some shit. Takes Roach on as Roach is a little boy. He takes Roach on as like a little mentee almost, and just lives injured and drunk and paranoid, and living off. He starts a little farm for himself, right? He farms his own vegetables, farms his own produce. Yeah, I had a good time with Prideaux. I did like that. So we again skimmed the 1979 adaptation because we just did not have 6 more hours of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy in us. Both of the adaptations appear to start with Operation Testify going wrong, which is great. And the movie does a really good job of being like, hey, here is why this is happening. Someone thinks there's a mole, and it's important to thwart the Russians because we think that if we don't, it'll start World War III. And also, the Americans won't deal with us because they think we're a leaky ship. I'm like, great. Thank you. I get it now. And in the movie, Jim Prideaux's death is a fake out. So it's not even like you don't know he's alive until 20 or 30 minutes into the film. Which I think adds a little bit of drama because the first thing you see is him getting shot.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, broadly, I think we're fans of the way the movie adapted the book. Although I think it's also important to note, I think it would be very difficult for somebody who was not affiliated or who hadn't had some familiarity with the book to watch that movie, because again, just a lot of characters, a lot of, at least for me, British men in suits that all look the same, except for, of course, Benedict Cumberbatch in the God's worst wig. um,
The movie, I would argue the movie was more homophobic than that book written in the 70s, because not only did they give him that fuck-ass ugly wig, the wig, for if any of the 40 of you listening out there are queers that are up current with Drag Race, the wig looks like a dollar store version of what Katya has going on right now, her fucking unit. And not only that, they randomly made Peter Gwillem explicitly gay. One of the only non-gay characters in that book. And they made Benedict Cumberbatch ugly cry on a bed about it. I think that shot was in the trailer, if I'm remembering correctly.
Huh. Weird. Yeah, they made him break up with his lover for I mean, listen, it was for a good reason in the movie, but like that scene doesn't exist in the book, which is wild.
Nope. Was
one
it
thing
to give Peter more like emotional stakes in the whole thing? That didn't, like, there was no payoff to it, because literally Smiley was just like, go tie up loose ends, and then Peter goes home and breaks up with his boyfriend, and his boyfriend's like, is there someone else? And he starts crying. That's it. That's the scene. Never brought up again.
Yeah, very weird. I think probably the most important thing, in the context of queer relationships, is that Prideaux and Bill Hayden are like explicitly confirmed in the book to have been lovers, right? Like that's textual in a big way, which is wild for a book from 1974. Firstly,
hold up, I have the quote. I think it might interest you all the same. Some tiny murmur about his time at Oxford. We're all entitled to be a pink at that age. Indeed, yes. The silence returned, broken only by the soft tread of Mendel upstairs. Prideaux and Hayden were really very close indeed, Lakin confessed. I hadn't realized.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, listen,
we're all entitled to be a bit pink at that age. Is so fucking good.
Me and Layla have a slight misinterpretation of that, because I thought that was a reading of people being like, oh, well, everybody goes to university and becomes a bit communist. But Layla's like, no, that means you're gay. And I think both readings are true, especially in England.
Yeah, the only instances I saw of pink in the novel were references to being gay. So I don't have the historical context.
Me either.
And I'm used to commies being referred to as Reds.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, write in if you think you have better context than us. Um,
Yeah.
but
Also,
yeah,
write in if
like
you want to watch this movie and then tell us if you understood it without reading the book. You can even finish listening to this episode. I'll let you do that. Finish listening to this episode, then go watch the movie, and then tell me if it made any fucking sense to you.
yeah, it seemed like a good movie. You know, I wouldn't know because I've been Le Carre pilled for the last 48 hours, but you know,
We're like our fucking crash course.
um. I mean, I think the most important thing is that, like, yeah, that context of Prideaux being Bill Hayden's, lover, like, them having a really deep relationship. I think there's like a really moving bit where um Prideaux like goes to warn Hayden right before he goes off on the Czechoslovakia mission. Um
Mm-hmm.
and like it's like kind of moving because the book goes out of its way to point out that like he was trying to warn all of his friends, like, hey, something's going wrong, I need you all to be careful, I care about you. And I like Prideaux a lot. He is kind of a crazy person, but I think that makes him really interesting. He's probably my favorite character in the book.
I like the dynamic of Prideaux and Hayden. You get to read like Hayden writing to the recruiter, the talent guy, the talent scout, whatever they
Hmm.
call them, about Prideaux, and he's like, there's a description of the two of them where like Hayden is the brains and Prideaux is the brawn, but then through growing up together, they kind of both balance each other out, and then after everything happens, they go back to their old ways where Hayden becomes more brains and Prideaux becomes more brawn. I like that. I like their interplay a lot, and like I like the way Hayden writes about Prideaux. Which like Hayden, I think this is a nice segue to Hayden. He's so like I think he's a cool character because he's oftentimes one of the only ones having fun.
Yeah, yeah, certainly in the movie he's like the only one who's smiling and like flirting with people. And
Colin fucking Firth.
yeah,
My
listen,
king.
they put him in Mamma Mia for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
They sure did.
you know, I think the thing about Hayden is that like we only ever see him through Smiley's lens for a lot of the time. So he's basically always just like confounded by the relationship that he had with Anne. And like he's like, we used to be really close. I really loved that guy. And then he, betrayed me like this, and that's ultimately why Hayden hooks up with Anne. It's revealed at the end of the book he sleeps with Anne in order to confuse Smiley, because Carla, the KGB agent, was like, you need to confuse Smiley, and the best way to do that is to make him emotionally vulnerable. I know he cares a lot about his wife because I stole this lighter from him. So go and hook up with his wife, and it worked. And that's why George really never could accept that Hayden was the mole until they actually catch him in this like secret meeting at the end of the book.
Yeah. But otherwise, Hayden is also characterized as like a known bisexual the entire time, which I thought was fun. Not even just an illusion, like they talk about, because he has that, right? Because it's not just Anne. He has that girl who had a baby, who Smiley gives money to at the end,
Mm-hmm.
and then also the boy, right, where he has to shut him up. And at one point they were talking about he kept showing up somewhere with like a chain of different girlfriends, and then at one point he brought like a male bartender.
Yes, with the gold chain
who
around
was
his waist. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think I just kept being taken aback. I think growing up in the Bush era, I'm just so braced for overt homophobia, where it was just like stated as fact, and I was like, oh,
yeah,
John le Carre, woke king.
Yeah, listen, we have to go return to the 70s.
Return.
One thing I think we should do before we get any further is talk about what Operation Testify even was. Like, what happened to Prideaux? Because I think that the movie does a pretty good job of explaining it. They have the meeting with him, meeting with Control, and being like, "Hey, here's what we're gonna go send you to do," and then him getting burned. But yeah,
the book has a cooler action sequence. I will give it that.
Yes, I agree.
So, Control thinks there's a mole, Prideaux's one of the only people not on this fucking suspect list. He gets sent to Czechoslovakia, and we're saying Czechoslovakia because that's what it was called in the period, not to be disrespectful to hashtag Czechia. And he is to meet with a general who is going to give the code name of the mole, but he figures out very quickly he's being tailed, and basically sends the guy who was driving him ahead of him to get sandbagged, and then tries to escape and almost escapes, and then gets shot and tortured for information, which he does unfortunately give, and then he gets shipped back to London and then becomes a school teacher.
Yeah. Honestly, aside from the torture, kind of came out of it pretty good.
I would say so.
Yeah. Now the torture is kind of a big aspect, but we won't linger on it.
And the torture is just like what, Aaron?
It's just like in Andor.
Like Andor.
Everything is based on Star Wars, guys. This booklet came out 3 years before the first Star Wars movie. There's just a scene where they are torturing him in the movie, and they're torturing him by making him listen to like recordings of like babies screaming and shit like that. And I was like, oh, that happened in Andor, and I was like, I'm boss babying Star Wars. Anyway, should we talk about Ricky Tarr? Because this is another like strange thing that, like, again, the movie does a pretty good job of incorporating into the plot, but like the book starts out with, and it's like, hey, here's this whole relationship I had with this Russian girl. It's gonna be relevant in a while, but it does take a while to get there. Also,
Ricky Tarr shows up. He's like, I have this whole thing with Irina, and then you're like 3 flashbacks deep because you're talking Ricky Tarr, he's talking to Smiley, describing Irina, and then we get into reading Irina's diary. And she's nuts.
Yes.
She's lost it, justifiably, but she has. And there's a lot of like, again, this book and the 1979 adaptation just like love to dig into the spycraft of it, where Smiley just asks questions like, what was the signal? My shirt was unbuttoned. What was the other signal? The radiator or the milk bottles or whatever. Like there's just so much of like talking about where their dead drops are, and like there's rat poop in the dead drop, and he spent 4 hours copying the journal, and didn't he do a good job? And it's like, did he? I don't know. There's so much information in your, I don't know how to select. Are we just bad at reading that we don't know how to select what's important?
I think I don't think we're bad at reading. I think it's just like we said at the beginning, this is a book that wants to be slow rolled, and or at least reread, and that's just not, books just aren't written like that. Like if you think about popular novels that we would have read over the last 30 years of our lives, like most of them do not use this kind of style, are not like as dialogue heavy, or not necessarily dialogue heavy, but like interested in the dialogues between characters. There's a lot of I bring up the idea of a novel being character driven, right? This is not a novel that's character driven, right? It is very plot driven in a major way, because it's like, okay, the plot has already happened. You're just kind of figuring out, how it happens. And, of course, Smiley unravels it, right? But like, he's not doing, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. It's mostly like, he's like, I'm going to talk to 5 different people, figure out what happened. And then at the end of the book, I'm gonna say, okay, now we're making it happen, right?
Yeah, I would argue this book is written, and the movie is also shot. I noticed this very early in watching the movie, but I would say both of these are not meant like American spy movies or spy games to make you feel clever or to make you feel like you're solving it. They are very much both like, you are now a fly on the wall. Be impressed.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Which is fine. And you and I recently, for our personal book club, our friend book club, we read Carol Claire Burke's Yesteryear, and I think that's like the closest example I can think of like a modern book that is very, I mean, it's very character driven, but it could use a reread, because there's a bunch of mystery shit that happens throughout, where like you can maybe, if you know the whole truth of what happened and how the main character ended up in her predicament, it's worth going back and seeing if you could see all the little hints. And she is a very unreliable narrator, and you could see where she's lying to herself or lying to other people or pushing through. So that's like the most recent example I can think of, really. But I don't read a lot of books like this, so I think it's part of the challenge.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. So, I don't think we should beat ourselves up about it, but I think it is worth noticing like what this book is doing differently that we are, maybe just not equipped for in books. Media teaches you how to engage with it. And when we have only engaged with books that are like, here is a straightforward narrative, it's not unsurprising. Or no, it's not surprising that we're having this kind of difficulty.
Yeah. Well, part of the reason I wanted to push for us to even do this episode, because there was a moment where we were like, do we want to, like, is this it? I think part of the reason I wanted us to be openly confused, or to kind of like experience friction on air, because I feel like because of our schedules and because of how tired we are on world events or whatever, a lot of the times we do, and this last unit, right, was Candy,
right?
So I think being kind of like openly challenged might be good for us, and then we'll see how this unit resolves, right?
Yeah. I think it'll definitely get easier. I think this is definitely the most difficult text we are engaging with. But yeah, it's I'm glad we are, and I'm glad that we are like having this open conversation about what we're struggling with, because it is the brain stretching that I wanted to get out of these new units. Do you have thoughts on Control and to contrast him with Percy Alaline?
I have thoughts on John Hurt as Control. Because in the movie, John Hurt shows up just to go nuts. I think it's really fun.
He's good.
But otherwise, it's a good portrait of like a man in decline. And again, I think on a reread, one of the things I would be looking out for is like, does Smiley's opinion of Control have a touch of sentimentality to it, where like maybe he's either hyper attentive to some things other people weren't, or he has a softer opinion or more confidence in Control than other people would, as Control sinks into kind of like paranoia, justifiably, apparently. But I do also like that Control hates Alaline and will take any opportunity to say fuck that guy to his face.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the book gets into a little bit more than the movie does, that like Control had kind of like put Alaline in a professional position where he couldn't really do anything without Control's, go ahead. So like that's why there's this building resentment between them, and why Alaline, kind of goes along with the plot to basically get Control kicked out. Basically, again, I don't think we've explained this super clearly, but Operation Testify happens because Alaline not creates, but like is given or comes up with a source called witchcraft,
Merlin.
right?
The source is Merlin, the product is witchcraft.
Right. And that they like, the British intelligence services are getting these information this information from the source, and they think it's all very good and impressive, and they trust Alaline, and eventually this source gives them Operation Testify, and that's how all the shit goes wrong. But like Layla, can you explain why I get really muddy on how the Alaline and Hayden and Esterhazy, how they're all involved with Merlin, like how, because it's not like Bill Hayden just gives Alaline, is just feeding him false information the whole time, right? Alaline is not knowingly a traitor, I don't think.
No. He is in fact cowed and embarrassed at the end of the book.
Right. That's kind of the sense I got. But like, so how did Hayden trick Alaline and Esterhazy into like giving them this false information? Because like it turns out Hayden is feeding them information that the Russians want them to know, and like it only seems like the information is good.
Well, Hayden's not the one doing the feeding, so
okay.
This is to my best fucking understanding here. Alaline shows up to kind of usurp Control with this source, Merlin, who has very valuable Russian information that is all true. It all pans out, is verified every time, like great reports. The reports are called witchcraft. And Alaline then goes around Control and his like blocking of funds and blocking of movement directly to a character we haven't really talked about, Lacan, and then someone called the Minister, to get funding directly for accommodations for Merlin, because the product is so good and it's gonna like, it's reinvesting in the circus, and the circus hadn't been producing and was kind of like stalled out until Merlin. This then, you know, spurs Control's suspicions. Operation Testify goes down, Control dies, Alaline gets elevated to Control's position and then starts kind of cleaning house. There's a select group of people that are allowed to see the witchcraft reports directly. Hayden is part of that, as are Bland, and the other guys.
Esterhazy?
Whose name's Esther has. My
Esther
mouth
Haas,
can't.
yeah.
Esther Haas. My mouth can't consistently do it for some reason. Anyway, and the whole thing is that Merlin isn't a guy. Merlin is a group of people, represented by Polyakov, who is with the Russian delegation in London. Polyakov meets with Hayden in this safe house that the British government is paying for, as if to give him witchcraft reports. But that is where Hayden is giving information back to Polyakov to take back to Moscow Central.
I forgot about Polyakov. Yeah.
How could you? Connie had such a crush on him.
I guess that's true. Do you want to explain Polyakov? I mean, you've already done a pretty good job of it, but like, there's just layers.
There's layers. He's with the Russian cultural delegation or whatever in London, like an actual diplomat. But then somebody figures out he used to be in the military, which implies that he's one of Carla's hoods, so to speak. And may I say, excellent accent on the actor. I think that is a Russian man. Terrible accent on whoever the fuck plays Carla. What was that?
Yeah.
And that's been your accent critique
Damn.
for the show.
Get him.
Did
Did we already explain what the title of the book means?
No. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So basically, Control's theory about the mole. He you know, when he's trying to get Predo to go do Operation Testify, you know, he believes that this general is going to give them the name, and each of the names of the people have been given a code name based on this English children's rhyme, which goes Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Sailor, Rich Man, Poor Man, Beggar Man, Thief, and it's, you know, some other shit. You can look it up in your own time.
Some other British urchin shit.
Yeah, like who gives a fuck? But like basically each of them has been given a name. I think Alaline was Tinker, Bill Hayden was Tailor, Bland was Soldier, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I remember that because a soldier doesn't have his own thoughts, and Bland made no impression on me.
That's how I remembered it too. Poor Man is Esterhaz because he was poor and got elevated to the circus because of Control, and then Beggar Man is Smiley, who's in there. So that's what that means. In case you ever want some trivia facts. Yeah, but that was Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy. I mean, I don't know how the experience of listening to this conversation felt for you, listener. If it's any consolation, reading the book was probably just as confusing.
If not more so. It was fun to go back and watch. I think the movie was really well crafted, and on a budget of $20 million, I think they did a really good job.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is going to be so hard to watch out for, but I think next time we get ourselves into a situation like this, where it's like a book we know is going to be a little bit of a challenge that has a known movie adaptation, it might be fun for us to kind of like switch stations, where one of us reads the book first and then watches the movie, and then one of us watches the movie first and then reads the book.
Yeah.
I don't know when else we're going to find ourselves in a situation like this, but I think it would be fun.
Right, right. It would be interesting to see. We'll try to do that experiment. So going forward in our unit, how do we want to take the themes, ideas, and techniques of Tinker Tailor forward into our unit on spycraft?
This might be a little bit too much podcast craft. Much in the style of John le Carré.
Yeah.
I would. Here's what I'm gonna do, and you can follow me if you'd like, or you cannot. I think I'm going to sit and in my G drive, not our shared G drive, in my G drive, I think I am going to write out my thoughts on Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and its format and the things that caught my eye and the things I think it's trying to do. I might also do some additional research. Like, I didn't get a chance to watch the YouTube video I sent you, so I'm going to watch that. I might read up a little bit more on the BBC adaptation or watch like an episode or two or something, just to give myself like a fully rounded grasp on, because I think there were some themes in this book that I just wasn't getting. Like, it's about love and betrayal. I'm like, I got too caught up in the technicalities that I wasn't really following the themes or the things it was doing with narration. So I'm going to do a little more research to really immerse myself and give myself a baseline and write myself a little diary. And then I think I'm going to try and look for connections or differences as we move through the rest, so that I am consciously building an understanding of the genre and its evolutions as seen by me, informed but by no means expert consumer.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting thing. I don't know if I'll follow you in that, but I will certainly read your write-up of that. And we'll see. Because I think if anything, this is going to be the most sharp contrast between everything else we're talking about, because like everything else in our unit is going to be what you would expect, flashy, explosive, dynamic in the way that you expect spy movies to be. And
I think this is just like Hitman Absolution.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Gosh, if only Hitman Absolution was like, press A to, I don't know, implicate somebody in an affair. That would be sick, actually. Yeah, for real. Layla, when we are not working the machinations of our own thread of informants, agents, and just shifting the tides of the Cold War generally, where can we be found on the internet?
You can find me at LEYLSES on Blue Sky and on Tumblr. My recommendation for the week is, if you like the craft of filmmaking, I recently have acquired a book called Studio Ghibli Architecture in Animation, and I bought this book thinking it would be like a light look at beautiful paintings. It is actually a very informative and very lovely expose by mostly an architect called Teranobu Fujimori, who's just as depressed as Miyazaki himself. And it's the two of them writing about, Miyazaki basically says, so I go on these research trips, and then I just look for places where I can go, this is good enough, and I can make up the rest. And then Fujimori has this really informed scholarly opinion on like the different architectural styles that Miyazaki mixes and the influences. And I thought it was a wonderful read. I got a lot out of it about process, and I highly recommend it. What about you?
You could find me on Blue Sky at AAVoit, Tumblr at Monster Factory Fanfic, and youtube.com/@AAVoit, where I sometimes make videos about tabletop games. At some point, I hope before the end of the year, I'll have a video on Titanium Court, but as you've seen in our recent episode disruptions, things are difficult for us right now, so who the hell knows when that'll happen. But I'll think about it. Our theme song is Obsolete by Keshko from the album Filmmakers Reference Kit Volume 2. You can find more of their music at keshko.bandcamp.com. Layla, do you have a way you would like to close out this episode?
I didn't hear anything. I gone deaf.
We'll see you all next time.